tuned in to Radio Gold. As you no doubt recall from the first half of our story, John Steed and Emma Peel find themselves in the proverbial pickle, as this perfectly perplexing puzzle leads them further down the path to personal peril. Stay tuned for the conclusion of our dramatic tale with the Avengers.
Now, from the makers of Cold Water Omo...
Roy Casper?
Colonel Mannering here.
Oh, thank goodness you've called, Colonel. Everything's gone wrong. Contacts have been murdered and I've been held. They think it's me. I've been questioned for hours and I didn't know how much to tell them.
They didn't get anything out of you. You obeyed orders exactly?
Yes, sir. I didn't tell them anything. Nothing about you or the organization.
Then there's nothing to worry about. You've done a splendid job, Casper. I'll contact the proper authorities right away. I'll clear you absolutely. There'll be no more questions. Now listen.
But while Colonel Mannering was reassuring Casper, a figure was creeping silently up the fire escape outside. It was Sergeant Blackie, and in his right hand he held a revolver.
The Avengers.
John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers.
Episode 4 of this story, in which John Steed finds himself at a dead end, and the balloon goes up for Emma Peel in what is clearly a case of interrogation. Mother and John Steed had been unable to get the truth from Roy Casper. They knew that secret information must have leaked out through him. Someone had, somehow, managed to persuade him to talk, to give away the names of his two contact men. The contact men had both died, and Casper had been given to understand that he was under suspicion of murder. Going back to his flat, Casper had sent an emergency message in the shape of a homing pigeon to Colonel Mannering. Mannering, aware that this was big trouble for his organization, had made his own plans, which was why he was taking so long over the phone call.
There's nothing to worry about, my boy. You just leave it all to me.
Yes, sir. But there is still so much I don't understand.
There's no need for you to understand. You do as you're told.
Yes, sir. Yes, of course, sir.
Yes. Remain quietly in your own apartment.
Yes, but they suspect I'm guilty.
I've told you I will clear you.
But Izzy Pound is dead. What about that murder, sir? I was the only one who knew him.
I have told you there is nothing to worry about.
But there was, for the man outside on the fire escape had succeeded in opening the window and slipping inside. Roy Casper was so intent on his phone conversation that he didn't hear the door open slowly. Blackie raised the revolver. On the other end of the line, the colonel heard the shot and the crash as Casper, dead before he reached the floor, fell heavily across the telephone, taking it with him. Colonel Mannering smiled.
Splendid. Splendid, Blackie.
The colonel replaced his own receiver with a smile of satisfaction. Downstairs in the street, John Steed's keen ears caught the sound of the shot. He left his car and raced into the building, tearing up to Casper's apartment. He burst in through the door.
Casper! Casper!
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. The body lay sprawled amongst the upturned table and telephone. A vase of flowers spilt water mixing with the blood on the carpet. And next to Casper's right hand was an ugly, black-snouted revolver. It looked as though Roy Casper, riddled with guilt by his own actions, had taken the easy way out. Next morning, Emma Peel also made a thorough search of her flat. This time it was Charles Minnow's, and she had Norton, the forensic expert, with her.
We've been all over everything, Mrs. Peel.
So I see. The place looks like it. You must call in on me when I'm next spring cleaning. Anything interesting?
This, a cigarette end. Very similar to the one we found in Roy Casper's flat when he disappeared. Hand-rolled, custom-made, mixture of Virginian and Turkish tobaccos. With
a preponderance of Oriental herbs, right?
Right.
Excuse me.
Mrs. Peel made for the phone. In his headquarters, Mother put down a dry sherry he was sipping and answered the call.
Mother?
We found something at Minnow's. A cigarette stub. Exactly the same brand as that found in Roy Casper's place. It's hand-rolled, custom-made mixture of Virginia and Turkish tobaccos, with a preponderance of Oriental herbs. What do you think?
I think it's revolting. Quite spoilt my sherry.
It proves there's a link.
It proves there's a kink, too. You better watch your step, Mrs. Peel. Any man who'd smoke such a nauseating mixture must be evil incarnate.
But don't you see? It's the same pattern as before. Whoever grabbed Casper has now grabbed Minnow.
We don't know for certain that Casper was grabbed.
Just the same.
Just the same, we must assume the worst. You're quite right, yes.
You mean Minnow will talk?
If it's the same pattern, then of course he will talk. And that means betraying his contacts. Minnow's number one contact is a fellow called Fillington. He's a professional footballer. You better get to him and tip him off. This is one game in which he really will have to keep his eye on the ball.
When Steed joined Mother later that morning, Mother wasn't very happy. He was even less happy when he heard of Casper's death the night before.
He couldn't be deader. He was shot in an attempt to make it look like suicide. It wasn't, of course.
I suppose it could have been.
No, it just looks like it. Casper was told to go away and think things over. Izzy Pound's death really shook him. Now, I swear he would have come clean sooner or later. Now, that's why they wiped him out.
They? Who are they?
Yes, well, that's just the point, isn't it? Who are they?
Mrs. Peel rang up. Minnow's missing. Mrs. Peel has found evidence to suggest there's been a similar snatch. It might be a complete repeat performance. Mrs. Peel's on her way to warn Fillington. He's Minnow's number one contact.
Well, let's hope it's not a repeat performance. Let's hope Fillington's still alive and kicking.
Fillington was alive and kicking. He was in a grassy field near his home, booting the ball against a tree.
46, 47...
Mrs. Peel, at the wheel of her sports car, was driving the roads around the area searching for Fillington. She saw him and screamed to a stop. Fillington missed the tree. The football rolled towards a small clump of bushes. Fillington made after it, just as Mrs. Peel drew up. As Fillington approached the bushes, the snout of a rifle pushed its way through the leaves. Fillington picked up the ball and started heading it. Mrs. Peel yelled from the near road.
Mr. Fillington! Mr. Fillington!
Fillington spun round. His head hit the ball just as the bullet hit his head.
Mother?
Mother? Mrs. Peel, too late.
Fillington?
Is dead.
Dead. I see.
This confirms it, doesn't it? Minnow has talked.
Looks like it. It's all systems go from now on.
I'm ready. Just give me the name of Minnow's second contact.
It's a street vendor. He has a stall in Bridgewell Road. His name is Herbert Puffin.
Got it. Herbert Puffin. Street vendor, Bridgewell Road. So that's Minnow's second contact.
Colonel Mannering was working on much the same lines.
Your second contact. The name of your second contact, Minnow? Oh, come on, man. The name of your second contact. Give it to me. Give me his name.
No. I say, escape attempts are allowed here, aren't they?
Certainly.
Good. I wouldn't want to break the rules, you know. I say, you've hurt your hand.
It's nothing.
Well, just the same, I'd put something on if I were you, sir. That was an awfully good punch, if you'll allow me to say so. I should think you've done a fair amount of boxing in the ring.
Well, I did box my battalion.
Really? Then you know old Gnosher, right?
We were in the same team together.
Yeah, splendid man, Gnosher.
First class.
Salt of the earth, but...
Enough of this! The name of your second contact. Tell me now. His name, Minnow. His name!
Bridgewell Road is nearly always busy. On the day Mrs. Peel called, it was unusually so. She searched for the street vendor, Herbert Puffin, and eventually found his stall. A sign above it read H. Puffin, balloon for every occasion. H. Puffin was occupied blowing up balloons from a small cylinder of gas. Balloons on various lengths of string bobbed all around him.
Mr. Puffin! Mr. Puffin!
Yeah?
Mr. Puffin, you're in great danger.
Danger? A gentle, silly old man, balloon seller like me. How could I possibly be in danger?
Look, I'm Emma Peel. Mother sent me here. Look, my identification.
The old man peered at the card Emma Peel held out. His manner changed. So did his accent.
Mother sent you, hmm? What's the problem?
Minnow, there's been a leak. His first contact's dead. We think you're known. If so, they'll be after you too.
Well, thanks for the warning. Perhaps I'd better pack and get...
Down! Down!
As old Puffin and Emma Peel dropped for cover behind the stall, balloons began to burst around them. Bullets sang out.
He's got us a bit pinned down, I'm afraid.
Yes, let's counterattack. Set these balloons free and burst a few of the others.
Blackie, the assassin, moved to the back of the stall. People in the street laughed as the balloons exploded. Mrs. Peel was waiting for Blackie. She jumped him.
Ah!
Oh! The gun dropped to the pavement. Old Puffin grabbed it. Mrs. Peel was thrown.
Ah!
Blackie staggered back, picked up the sharp scissors Puffin had been using to cut his string, and plunged forward, using them as a dagger. He drew his arm back, ready to stab, when... Ah! Puffin stood amongst the wreckage of his stall, the revolver in his hand.
Funny. I'm so old, and yet... That's the first man I've ever killed.
The Avengers. Listen every evening, Monday to Friday, to John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers. Brought to you by the makers of Cold Water Omo.
Let's take a short intermission. Nero Wolfe made his larger-than-life radio show debut on July 5, 1943. This intelligent detective show, based on the Rex Stout novels, proved to be a natural for classic radio. Throughout the show's run, Santos Ortega, Louis Van Rooten, Francis X. Bushman, and Sidney Greenstreet all filled the voluminous chair of Nero Wolfe. As well, a large assortment of actors played the part of every blonde's hero, Archie Goodwin. The Adventures of Nero Wolfe show remained popular on the airwaves in different versions for 8 years, from 1943 to 1951.
Now, from the makers of Cold Water Omo...
Got us a bit pinned down, I'm afraid, Mrs. Peel.
Yes, Mr. Puffin, but let's counterattack. Set these balloons you were selling free and burst a few others.
As the balloons floated up from the old street vendor's stall, Blackie, the assassin, worked his way to the back of the stall. The people in the street laughed at the balloons bursting. Mrs. Peel didn't laugh. She waited for Blackie and jumped him. The gun dropped to the pavement. Old Puffin grabbed it. Mrs. Peel was thrown. Blackie staggered back, picked up the sharp scissors Puffin had been using to cut the string of his balloons, and plunged forward to stab Mrs. Peel when... Ah! Puffin stood amongst the wreckage of his store, the revolver in his hand.
Funny. I'm so old, and yet... that's the first time I've ever killed.
The Avengers.
John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers.
Episode 5 of this story, in which John Steed and Mother remain baffled by the whole affair, and Emma Peel is taken away for a case of interrogation. Two young agents, Caspar and Minnow, had disappeared mysteriously, and subsequently their contact men had been killed. It was clear that there had been a serious security leak. Wilson and Izzy Pound, Caspar's two contact men, had met untimely deaths, and later, faced with these facts, Caspar himself had been shot. Charles Minnow's first contact, Fillington, had also died, and Mrs. Peel had forced Mother to tell her the name of the second contact, who was surely in grave danger. The second contact had turned out to be old Herbert Puffin, and this time Mrs. Peel had been lucky. In the struggle in Bridgewell Street, she'd narrowly escaped death. The assassin, Blackie, had been killed. Mrs. Peel was grateful and frustrated.
A dead man is a dead end, Steve.
Yes, see what you mean. He can't lead us to whoever he was working for.
That's right. Still, it has proved quite a few things.
That Minnow must have talked.
Yes.
Well, what's happened to old Puffin?
Well, the balloon went up in every sense. He folded his stall up and disappeared in double-quick time. I don't think he'll be around for some time. Oh, I've no doubt he'll make the contact when things have cooled off. Meanwhile,
a full report to Mother. Any idea who the would-be assassin is?
New to me. The boys at headquarters will run a complete check on the body. They may come up with something.
I wonder what our chances are of picking up Minnow.
Slight.
I'm not so sure. After Caspar's two contacts had been killed, he turned up as though nothing had happened. Minnow could do the same.
Well, not once they realize we've killed that man. Could be that he arranged all the other deaths. If we've knocked him out, then they may silence Minnow once and for all. He has no more contact.
Could be. Oh, well, let's think of the inner man and not the link man. Lunch, Mrs. Peel?
That afternoon, in Mother's headquarters, Steed and Mother sat over coffee, staring at the forensic reports and photographs.
Well, this is a pretty kettle of fish. Report is clear enough. Accurate description of the man, fingerprints, photographs.
We don't know him. No one does. No police record, nothing.
Even I don't know him, and I pride myself on knowing everyone.
Yes, he's a new fellow, all right.
The whole thing is new, the entire situation. There must be a new organization working. This is dangerous.
And baffling. We haven't got a clue on him.
Anonymous. Like that chap in the photograph. What the devil?
Someone wants to join us.
Well, I'm not expecting anyone.
The concealed door at the top of the gallery started to swing inwards. Someone outside had known the correct number to dial in order to enter Mother's headquarters. Not many people had that privilege.
Minnow's the last link. If only we could find Minnow.
Someone looking for me?
Minnow!
Well, I was just on my way home, but I thought I'd better pop in just in case something urgent had cropped up.
I don't believe it.
Well, then, what's been happening in the jolly old world of intrigue, eh?
Mother looked at Steed. Steed looked at Mother. And they both looked towards the liquor cabinet.
Have a drink, Minnow.
Jolly decent of your mother.
A large one, Mother.
A very large one, Steed. Fine weather for this time of the year, eh?
Well, a little cold, sir.
Your drinks.
Thank you, Steed. And I give you a toast. To absent friends. Will you drink to that, Minnow?
Yes, sir, of course. Cheers.
Absent friends like this man.
Mother shot a photograph of Blackie across the table at Minnow.
Who? Blackie?
You know him?
Yes, of course I do. It's Sergeant Blackie. He works at... Oh, no. I'm not falling for that one. They warned me you might try to trip me up a little.
How trip you up?
Faking Blackie's death like that.
That is no fake, Minnow.
Oh, come.
That is no fake, Minnow. That man, Blackie, or whatever his name is, was shot and killed while attempting to murder Mr. Puffin.
Puffin? But that's ridiculous. How could anyone possibly know about Puffin?
That is what we want you to tell us.
Is he really dead?
Really? We could run you down to the morgue to see for yourself, but that'd be a waste of time. And we don't have time to waste, Minnow. No time at all. Now talk.
Well, I don't know. Well, I ought to contact Mannering first.
Mannering?
Colonel Mannering.
Who's he?
Oh, now come on, Mother. Surely you must know.
I do not know a Colonel Mannering. You will please explain what you're talking about.
If you don't mind, I think I'd like to sit down.
You'd better. Sit down and start from the very beginning, Minnow. We want to know everything.
Mrs. Peel was taking a quiet rest, her feet up and a harmless novel on her lap, when the doorbell rang.
Oh, coming! Yes?
Mrs. Peel, Mrs. Emma Peel.
Yes?
Colonel Mannering, Interdepartmental Security, Head of Oriental Military Studies, my identity cards.
Mannering handed over an elaborate wallet.
You'd better come in.
Thank you. I'd be obliged if you would give the identification papers more than just a cursory glance, Mrs. Peel. I want to be sure that you know exactly who I am and what I represent.
Oh, of course.
Mrs. Peel studied the papers.
Perhaps you would be good enough to let me see your own identification papers.
Of course.
Mrs. Peel opened a drawer in the desk, took out a wallet, and handed it to Mannering.
Thank you.
You're awfully cautious.
Have to be. You watch others, Mrs. Peel. We watch you.
Big brother,
We would like to think our interest was more, paternal.
Would you like a drink?
No, thank you. Drinking whilst on duty is something we discourage amongst our operatives.
Too bad. I'm not on duty at the moment. Do I take it that you are Colonel Mannering?
I'll get right to the point, Mrs. Peel. I have orders here to escort you to Centre 53, where you will attend the TOHE refresher course A7. Perhaps you would like to examine these orders?
I'll take your word for it.
Oh, please, I'd rather you didn't. Here.
Mrs. Peel took the documents and scanned them.
You'll see the course is covered under Secret Security Sealed Instructions number 47, subsection QR 9432.
It says the course is to start immediately.
As of this moment, yes.
But I've been working full out on an assignment for the past 24 hours without a break.
And you are tired?
Very.
Precisely why the course starts immediately, Mrs. Peel. When you are weary, when your endurance can be taxed to the limit.
But the assignment I'm on hasn't finished yet.
It has, as far as you are concerned. Naturally, you have a right to complain to a higher authority. Perhaps you might like to pick up that telephone and call Mother?
I might just do that.
You have already committed a cardinal error, admitting to me that Mother even exists. That will cost you 10 demerit points. A bad start.
Mannering picked up the phone and placed it in Mrs. Peel's hand.
Well, go ahead. Make the call. Although I can assure you it won't do you any good. After all, he selected you for the course.
Very well, Colonel Mannering. But what is the TOHE course, anyway?
A test of human endurance.
In Mother's headquarters, Minnow had been answering questions yet again. Poor Minnow didn't know which side he was on by the time he'd finished.
The TOHE course? Test of human endurance?
That's right. That's what he said. The TOHE. Refresher course, A7.
Never heard of it. Oh, well, only one way to find out. Hello, Mother speaking. Put me through to Security Internal. Security internal. What do you know about TOHE refresher course A7? Yes, A7. Well, get hold of someone who does know and ring me back.
Minnow, you say you were taken to Center 53?
Yes, that's right.
Well, where is it?
In the country, a large house.
Yes, but where?
Well, I don't know. It was part of the security arrangements that I shouldn't know. I was taken there in a closed van. A small, black, closed van.
A small, black, closed van was moving away from the pavement outside Mrs. Peel's apartment. In the front seat, next to the driver, smiling grimly, was Colonel Mannering. Inside, clutching a small suitcase, was Mrs. Peel. You're still lagging way behind, Steed.
The Avengers.
Listen every evening, Monday to Friday, to John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers. Brought to you by the makers of Cold Water Omo.
Let's take a short intermission. Radio Gold is pleased to present these collected rare recordings, 4 adventures of Conan the Cimmerian. Conan the Cimmerian, of course, also known as Conan the Barbarian, is a fictional sword and sorcery fantasy hero that originated as a character created by writer Robert E. Howard in 1932 via a series of fantasy stories published in Weird Tales magazine. Of course, this has been since adapted to books, comics, films, television programs, and, of course, radio shows. Well, you get the idea. A character iconic over time. This special bank holiday edition of The Avengers has 7 episodes instead of the usual 6. Stay tuned. The penultimate episode starts in a few seconds.
Now, from the makers of Cold Water Omo,
a small, black, closed van turned up the driveway of a country house. It stopped at the front door. The back doors of the van were opened, and Mrs. Peel got out, blinking at the light. Colonel Mannering led her up the steps and into the reception room. At the desk, a man in Army Sergeant's uniform said,
Good afternoon, miss.
Good afternoon.
Identification, please.
Mrs. Peel produced the necessary papers.
Thank you. Sign here, please, Mrs. Peel.
As Mrs. Peel was signing the register, a door opened and a young man staggered out. He looked very disheveled and worn out, eyes bloodshot and clothes torn.
Emma Peel. Didn't know you were coming here. Remember me, Paul Mullard? We were in training together.
Why, yes. Yes, of course. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing okay, I think. See you in the bar later. Look forward to that.
Come on, you. We haven't finished with you yet. Come here.
The Avengers.
John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers.
Episode 6 of this story, in which John Steed gets on the beam at last, and Emma Peel has her first experience in A Case of Interrogation. Charles Minnow was more than a little confused. He'd returned to Mother's headquarters in all innocence to find Mother in a black mood. 3 men had died, and it was clear that their deaths were a direct result of a leakage of information from the TOHE refresher course A7 that Minnow had just taken at Centre 53. But Minnow couldn't tell Mother and John Steed where Centre 53 was. He'd been taken there in a small, black, closed van, and subjected to the toughening up treatment in strict secrecy. And now, without anyone else being aware of it, Mrs. Peel was about to undergo a similar experience.
This is the key to your room, Mrs. Peel. I'll trust you enjoy your stay.
Thank you. I think perhaps enjoy is the wrong word. Isn't it, Colonel Mannering?
We can at least start off pleasantly, Mrs. Peel. Let's have a drink in the bar, shall we?
Mannering placed a hand under Mrs. Peel's elbow and guided her towards a door. Inside, the bar was filled with officers of all ranks.
I think you will enjoy it in here. Once you're settled in, we've got a jolly fine bunch here, fine spirit of comradeship, and we try to make everyone stay as comfortable as possible.
They appear jolly enough.
Plenty of recreations, too, sports, that kind of thing. I'm particularly concerned about the men's well-being. Afternoon, Johnson.
Afternoon, sir.
Johnson, an RAF man, grinned with a split lip and adjusted a piece of sticking plaster that covered a bruise on his forehead.
Gentlemen, may I introduce Mrs. Emma Peel? This is the spy sacrosanct. It's the only place in the whole building where you can relax, where you can switch off. But let me remind you, the course has begun. You may be taken from here and interrogated at any time. Any time at all.
In Mother's headquarters, the bewildered Minnow goes over it all again.
So, Minnow, the course was to test your breaking point, your reliance as an agent.
Well, that's what Colonel Mannering said. He had papers to prove it.
Yeah. Mother? Yes. Yes. Thank you. The course was A7 under the direction of Colonel Mannering.
Yes, Mother, that's it.
Doesn't exist.
But surely...
No course A7 and no Colonel Mannering.
It's clever. You have to admit it's clever.
Turning our own secret bureaucracy into a weapon.
That's right. Tied us up with our own red tape, and it's so simple.
Persuade our agents the course is genuine, get their full cooperation, and then interrogate them for as long as they like.
Until they talk.
But that isn't true. It isn't. I got a Class 1 pass mark. They interrogated me for hours, but I didn't talk. I didn't tell them a darn thing. I swear I didn't talk.
You didn't? Well, then how the devil do they work it?
How? Like this.
Name, my lord. Give me the name.
No.
Yes, my lord. Yes. I want this name. Give me the name, my lord. The name. The name. The name.
No.
Very good, my lord. Jolly good show. First class.
You mean that's it?
We haven't been able to break you. I don't think we ever could.
You mean it's really over?
All over. Except the congratulations. You've passed. Class 1.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Come along, I'll buy you a drink. 2 or 3 if you like. I expect you feel you deserve one.
And so, to the bar.
Well done, my lord. Well done. Jolly good show.
How about another, sir?
Not just a moment. I've had 3 straight already. You know, sir, I thought you were kidding me about the Class 1 pass, I mean. Have I really got one?
Take my word for it. Mind you, it was touch and go at one point.
Mind telling me why, sir?
Well, I suppose it can't do any harm now that the whole thing's over. It was, when we were questioning you about your contact in Hong Kong. I thought we had you a couple of times there, but you held out. Kept denying you had such a contact. That's good. Say again, please, Barker.
Yes, sir.
Mind you, the fact that you don't have a contact in Hong Kong must have helped.
Oh, but I do, sir.
No.
Afraid, sir.
Well, you really did well then, didn't you? I didn't suspect you for one moment. You fooled us completely.
Your drinks, gentlemen.
Ah, thank you. Cheers. Yes, you covered the whole thing brilliantly. Who is he, by the way? Someone I know?
I doubt it, sir. Name's George Criddle.
What? Oh, Georgie?
The new name?
Well, it is the chap I'm thinking of.
Oh, tall chap, glasses, fair, moustache.
That's him. George Criddle. Tall, glasses, fair, moustache. Well, just imagine that. Say, it'd be great to get in touch with him after all this time. Where can I reach him?
Well, I usually contact him at the Fu Young Bar.
George Criddle, the Fu Young Bar, Hong Kong. Must remember that, my lad. Cheers.
Back at Mother's, Minnow is still thinking it out.
I can't see how they could have worked it, Mother.
Hypnosis, perhaps.
No. I'd know. I'm sure I'd know.
You were drugged. They got you under drugs?
They didn't.
They must have tricked the information out of you in some way.
But that's impossible. Look, from the moment I went into that place, I was on guard. The whole time they were at me, I was watching every point. I didn't relax for one moment. I never told any.
Yes?
Oh. The bar. The bar. In the bar after it was all over. That's how it must have happened. In the bar, the one place where we were allowed to relax, to lower defenses, swap confidences. Oh, I'm sorry, Mother.
Sorrow is a negative after-the-event emotion, Minnow. What we want now is positive thought. Attack.
What do you suggest, Mother?
Mother?
Norton here, Mother. Forensics.
Yes, Norton, what is it?
I'm at Miss Spiel's apartment. I called to give her my findings on the Casper and Minnow cases, sir.
Which are?
Negative, sir.
Only forensics will make a special trip to tell you that they haven't found anything. Get to the point, Norton. Or better still, let me speak to Mrs. Peel.
That's the whole point, sir. She isn't here.
What?
And I found another of those cigarette stubs. The one with the gold filter. They have Turkish and...
Yes. We don't want to hear about that filthy concoction. I can guess the rest. Some clothes are missing.
That's right, sir.
And don't tell me. And a toothbrush. That's all we need.
Mother slammed the receiver back into its cradle and glared at Minnow.
Mrs. Peel is taking a refresher course. Where is that Center 53? You've got to remember, Minnow.
I can't. I just can't. I don't know.
Don't you understand? They've taken Emma Peel. She's different to you and Casper. She's brighter, sharper, more intelligent. Now, they may fool her for a while. That plan's clever enough to fool anyone for a while. But sooner or later, she's going to realize what's going on. And then she won't last 5 seconds.
You were taken to a country house?
Yes.
A large house?
Yes.
Old or new?
Old.
How old?
50 years, 100.
Think, Minnow, think. There must be something.
Now, just a minute. Now, you thought we were tricking you with Blackie's death. You thought it was a test to make sure you wouldn't reveal the details of the course A7. Now, what if it all went wrong? What if you'd found yourself on trial for treason? What then?
Then I'd contact Colonel Mannering, and he'd clear me. Of course! I have a pigeon, a homing pigeon. Well, I can release it. It goes straight to Center 53.
Oh, come on, get that pigeon, and we may get Mrs. Peel and Colonel Mannering.
The Avengers.
Listen every evening, Monday to Friday, to John Steed and Emma Peel,
The Avengers. Brought to you by the makers of Cold Water Omo. The Avengers. Donald Monat as John Steed and Diane Appleby as Emma Peel is adapted and directed by Dennis Falbig and produced by David Gooden.
Let's take a short intermission. San Francisco private detective Sam Spade takes on a case that involves him with three eccentric criminals: a gorgeous liar, a fat man, a foreigner, and their obsession to own a priceless statuette. With the stakes rising after his partner is murdered, the quest for the Black Bird consumes them all in this live radio adaptation of Dashiell Hammett's worldwide best-selling detective novel. In 1943, the Columbia Broadcasting System, Cecil B. DeMille, and the Lux Radio Theater entertained a wartime America by presenting Edward G. Robinson as Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon. Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion of our Avenger adventure.
Now, from the makers of Cold Water Omo...
Thick, Minnow, thick! There must be something.
Just a minute, Mother. You thought we were tricking you with Black as Death, didn't you, Minnow?
That was the brief. Mannering said that the course didn't really finish when we left the center, that there'd be other tests.
Unexpected tests, to make sure that you wouldn't reveal any details of Course A7. But what if it all went wrong? What if you found yourself on trial for treason?
Well, then I'd contact Colonel Mannering and he'd clear me. Make sure that The pigeon. I have a pigeon, a homing pigeon. I can release it and it'll go straight to Center 53. Colonel Mannering will then contact me within the hour.
Within the hour? Well, it can't be too far away, then.
As the crow flies. Now, get that pigeon, Minnow, and we may get Mrs. Peel and Colonel Mannering.
The Avengers.
John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers. Episode 7, the final episode of this story, in which John Steed drops in on Center 53, where he and Mrs. Peel call Colonel Mannering's bluff regarding a case of interrogation. John Steed and Mother had managed to piece a few fragments of the case together. They now knew that there was an organization which was using their own red tape to gain information from various military secret agents. They knew this organization was run by a man called Colonel Mannering, and that his headquarters was an old house known as Center 53. But no one knew where this house was, or how to get there, until Minnow remembered the pigeon. John Steed called for a helicopter immediately, and from a spare piece of ground near Minnow's apartment, prepared for action.
Right. Release her on a sign from me, Minnow.
Right. And the best of luck, sir.
Okay, pilot. Start her up.
Very good, Mr. Steed.
Ready?
All ready.
Right. Let her go now, Minnow.
Minnow opened the wicker basket. The pigeon fluttered out, stretched its wings, and took to the sky.
Right. Follow that pigeon.
In the interrogation room at Centre 53, Colonel Mannering paced up and down, slapping his riding crop against a well-polished black boot. The door opened, and two burly officers pushed Mrs. Peel into the room.
Manners make it mad.
Come in and sit down, Mrs. Peel.
That's a little more polite. Thank you, Colonel.
We'll begin with all you know about John Steed.
Oh? You've got to be joking. Neither of us could have that amount of time.
Colonel Mannering slammed his riding crop down hard on the table.
You will take this interrogation seriously, Mrs. Peel. There will be no sleep, no food, no water until you cooperate.
Oh, can't I even have a cigarette? One of those awful ones that are custom-made with Virginia and Turkish tobaccos and a preponderance of oriental herbs.
What?
You're careless the way you leave them around, aren't you? I should have thought with your training you'd not have been so careless.
Enough! You will talk. Tell me everything I want to know. Everything. Where is Steed at this moment? Where is he?
John Steed was hanging on like grim death as the helicopter skidded about in the skies above Centre 53. They'd lost sight of Minnow's pigeon.
Oh, can't see it anywhere now, sir.
I'd better go down. She must have gone to roost down there. Let's see what lies below, shall we?
Right.
The helicopter descended rapidly, Steed peering through a pair of binoculars. The pigeon had gone to roost, all right. It fluttered in and settled on the reception desk. Sergeant Rasker picked it up.
I say, Rasker, someone in trouble?
Yeah, looks like it, Mr. Mullard. Let's see. Yes, this is Minnow's pigeon, isn't it? The Colonel will have to be informed at once.
The Colonel was still busy with Mrs. Peel. She was undergoing that wretched sound treatment.
The truth, Mrs. Peel, the truth about John Steed.
He doesn't know himself. How should I know? I'm not my partner's keeper.
I thought I was told you never to interrupt an interrogation, Rasker.
Sorry, sir, but this just arrived. It's Minnow's.
I see. Right. One of you men take over here.
Right, Colonel.
Mannering left the room and marched angrily along the corridor.
Well, it's Minnow's pigeon, all right, Colonel.
That I can see for myself.
And there's been a helicopter following it.
What?
Just reported landing in the grounds.
Steed. It must be John Steed. They're onto us. Get two men and cover the rear entrance of the bar.
That's all very well, sir. But it's a big house. There are at least a dozen other ways in.
And there'll be an armed man on every one. Open the armory, all the guns you can find. I'll summon our trainees. Sound the emergency alarms. This must be a general call.
All right, sir. Right, sir.
A few moments after that, bells rang throughout the centre, followed by the sounds of running feet as the men rushed to the main hall for instructions.
What's going on? I say.
Well, gentlemen, are we all here?
Where's Charlie? Oh, yes, he's
good. Now, this is the nature of the surprise test. We have arranged for an intruder to break into the centre. Your task will be to deploy and find him. You will each be armed with a pistol. Pistols will be loaded with blanks, of course. Rasker, hand out the pistols.
Yes, sir.
When you find the intruder, you will shoot to kill. And there will be 10 merit points for the lucky man. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir. Who's playing the intruder?
A good friend of ours. He has just arrived by helicopter. You can't fail to recognize him. Bowler hat, impeccably dressed, carries an umbrella. Some of you may even know him. Steed. John Steed. Off you go then, chaps. And don't forget 10 points for the lucky man who kills him.
Mrs. Peel, in the interrogation room, heard the rumpus going on down the corridor. She said to the officer guarding her,
Shouldn't we go and join him?
My orders were to see that you were remained here, alone.
But those were alarm bells. This is an emergency. I really think we shouldn't be excluded. Let's go.
Stay where you are. That's an order. Now don't get up or move.
Oh, don't be such a silly soldier. That gun's not loaded.
Oh, yes, it is. And I have no hesitation in firing it.
Are you really serious?
Of course.
But this is a training center. This isn't for real,
Just
you know?
stay where you are, or you'll find out.
In that case, I think I shall have to accept your challenge.
Mrs. Peel, who had been sitting calmly on a wooden chair, rose to her feet and, grasping the chair back, flung it at him. When the revolver went off, Mrs. Peel moved in quickly. fight didn't last long. Mrs. Peel got a good hold and threw the guard across the room. Mrs. Peel opened the door and stole quietly up the passage, just as John Steed opened one of the windows at the back of the house. There was a guard in the room.
Stay where you are! Don't move! Come out from behind the curtain.
The guard advanced and bent down to see what had slumped to the floor. He drew the curtains apart. John Steed said, "Good afternoon," and hit him with the steel rim of his bowler. Then chaos began to reign. Mrs. Peel, coming up the passage, ran straight into Rasker.
Here, Mrs. Peel, what are you doing on it?
Sorry, got a thing against firearms today.
Mrs. Peel did a splendid high kick and knocked Rasker's gun down the passage. A few moments later, Rasker followed it. John Steed, coming up the passage, stepped neatly over Rasker's body and picked up his gun just as Mullard and a crowd of other men raced up.
Hands up, Steed!
Steed obliged.
I say, but we're supposed to kill him, aren't we?
I saw him first.
No, I did.
Now, just a minute. Hold on.
It's mine.
It's 10 points for the kill, isn't it? Well, then, there are 5 of us here. Why don't we all shoot at once and claim 2 points each?
I say, that's a good idea.
Right.
All right,
I think so.
1, 2, 3...
No!
Mrs. Peel dashed forward, did a great leaping roll over the group of officers and landed in front of Steed.
No!
I say.
Those guns are loaded with real bullets.
Oh, come now, Emma. You just want the 10 points for yourself.
Look, we've all been duped. This whole course is a fake.
She's right, you know.
Jolly good deal. Excellent. Testing their gullibility, trick 'em. See how they react to the persuasive tongue of the enemy,
Mannering is the enemy. I'm telling the truth.
Is she? Don't forget there are 10 merit points at stake, gentlemen.
Those guns are loaded with live ammunition. Please believe me.
Very convincing, but not quite convincing enough. Eh, gentlemen?
Might I make a suggestion? There's a simple way to see who's bluffing. You, Mullard, isn't it? Point your gun at Colonel Mannering and pull the trigger. I'll count to 3. 1, 2...
All right, why not?
No! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
Mannering dived for the floor as the bullet crashed into a light. Steed stepped forward and hit Mannering hard on the back of the neck with his umbrella.
Gentlemen, shall we adjourn to the bar? I need a drink. Don't you, Mrs. Peel?
The Avengers.
Listen every evening, Monday to Friday, to John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers. Brought to you by the makers of Cold Water Omen. The Avengers. Donald Monat as John Steed and Diane Appleby as Emma Peel is adapted and directed by Dennis Falbig and produced by David Gooden.
Radio Gold is a 3 Nines Fine radio production. See you next time.